Hey, you are sleeping out there, remember? On the night of the family vacation, what came out from my mother-in-law's mouth was something I had never imagined. Mom, outside? Didn't you hear me? There's no room for you. Outsiders should sleep in the parking lot. Oh no. Why did my mother-in-law offer to share a room with me? Now I finally understood why. I had been looking forward to this family vacation for a long time. I thought it would be a good opportunity to get to know my mother-in-law better. That's what I had thought. However, I had no way of knowing that things would take an unexpected turn later on. My name is Ella. I'm 29 years old. I'm a housewife, and I work for a company. I married my husband Dan about 6 months ago. After 2 years of dating, we made it to the finish line. For 1 year, we lived together in the apartment where he lived. I thought I would continue to live there after our marriage, but one day before we registered, he said something like this. My mom is asking me to rent an apartment near their house. What? Your mother? Why? I don't really know either, but my parents are getting old, and it would be safer to have someone younger nearby. You know, I'm an only child. I see. As I recall, your mother gave birth to you at an older age, right? Yes. She had me when she was 38, so she's almost 70. These days, she has trouble walking to the supermarket. I see. According to Dan's story, my parents-in-law are worried about their future since they are both quite old. They don't seem to have any problems in their daily lives, but they must be feeling a little anxious. However, thankfully, they are not asking us to live with them. It would be harder for us to move in together, but it would be easier for us to live close by. I smiled and said to Dan, I understand. I'm worried about your mother and father, so let's move closer to them when we get married. Is that okay? You say it so easily. Because you're worried about your parents too, aren't you? But then, you might have a hard time. Well, they're my in-laws, but they're going to be my family now, and I want to make sure we have a good relationship. Thank you, Ella. You're being a great help. Dan looked somewhat relieved. He worried about his parents and about how it might cause me trouble. I guess he was also conflicted by the combination of these feelings. The moment I saw his relieved face, I also felt somewhat refreshed. I'm nervous about being so close to his parents, but it will lessen Dan's anxiety. Besides, I'm their daughter-in-law too, so I should do what I can to help. Thus, when we got married, we moved into an apartment, which was a 10 minutes walk from my in-laws' house. When I showed up at my parents-in-law's house after the move, my mother-in-law called out to me happily. Ella, thank you so much. Dan told me that you accepted the offer to live nearby so easily. Oh, it's nothing. I would like to help in any way I can. As I recall, your parents live far away, right? Yes, about 2.5 hours by train. Oh my God, that's a long way. But that's okay. From now on, you can think of me as your other mother and be spoiled a lot. Mother? Yes, thank you. My in-laws have a very friendly nature and are never painful to talk to. I would have a good relationship with them. That's what I thought. But at that time, I was still unaware of what was about to happen. I was about to face an inevitable problem. It was one day, about a week after our marriage, that I realized this. My husband works on the weekends, so our days off do not overlap. But since we both cherish our mornings and evenings, we didn't miss each other much. It was Sunday, and my husband usually goes to work. It was a little after 9 a.m. I was having a leisurely breakfast when the intercom rang. I wondered who it was. I thought I should have received all my packages. Maybe something from my mother at home? Mother! I shouted out in surprise. Then my mother-in-law opened her mouth, looking somewhat unhappy. How long are you going to make me wait, Ella? It's been almost 30 seconds since I pressed the intercom. I'm sorry, I'm just having breakfast. Breakfast? What time do you think it is? You're such a senseless person. What? Don't just stand there. Get the slippers ready. And some tea. Yes, here you go. I did as I was told and prepared slippers for my mother-in-law. Before I could invite her in, my mother-in-law headed for the living room, sat down on the sofa, and began to look around the room. I don't know why she was in the bad mood, but I must have put her in a bad mood any longer. I hurriedly prepared a cup of tea and brought it to her. Here you go. I'm sorry I didn't have any tea cakes. She sighed and said in a disgusted tone, You can't even make tea properly. You're not a good wife, are you? I guess I will have to train you after all. Huh? Train me? All right. Now that I have given you my blessing to marry Dan, you are going to act exactly as a member of the great family from now on, okay? Nobody talks that way about accepting our marriage, right? And besides, don't you remember? You said, think of me as your other mother, right? At these words, my mother-in-law burst out laughing and looked at me as if I was an idiot. What are you talking about? You can't possibly have taken those words seriously. Of course it was because your father-in-law and Dan were there, weren't they? Then you mean you didn't really think that? Of course. What's the value of a plain, good-for-nothing wife like you? Dan brought you here, so I said yes for the time being. But I was supposed to be the one to find Dan's partner. But that doesn't mean you have to talk like that. Shut up. All you have to do is what I tell you to do. I finally understood what I had seen in my mother-in-law. I realized that everything I had seen of my mother-in-law was a fabrication of her character. In reality, she was a person with such a warped nature. Perhaps she became this way because she loved her son so much. But that does not mean that she should be hostile toward her son's wife. However, I don't think she would listen to me even if I talked back to her. Besides, I didn't want to upset family relations in a situation where we had just gotten married. It is not in my nature to disobey my elders. No matter how wrong my mother-in-law's way of thinking was, it was not so easy to talk back to my husband's mother. The fact that I didn't speak back here made the situation worse. My mother-in-law began to visit us regularly without prior notice, and began to bully me under the guise of helping me. You are a really bad wife, aren't you? You can't even do your own housework. You're worthless. If you're such a failure, I shouldn't have let you get married. And so on. How many times have I shed tears at these heartless words? Of course, I thought about talking to my husband about it, but my mother-in-law made the first move. I'm visiting because I want to get to know Ella. She told that to my husband. Whenever my husband came home from work, he would smile and say to me, Did my mother come by today too? I'm really sorry, okay? She's the type of person who goes all out with people she wants to be friends with. No, you know Dan. Well, you will have to cut her some slack. Mom is very happy to have a girl like you as a daughter-in-law. I see. The smile on my husband's face as he spoke happily was too bright for me to tell the truth. In such a state, I realized that half a year had passed since our marriage. My mother-in-law was still bullying me. Then one day, my mother-in-law called my husband and I to her house and told us about our family vacation. Let's go on our annual family vacation. This year, Ella is coming with us. Me too? Of course, we're a family. She had already decided where to go and where to stay, it seems. The destination was a hotel with a spa, and the rooms were for 2 people only. I thought it would be just me and my husband, but then my mother-in-law made an outrageous comment. Oh, by the way, Ella, you'll be staying with me in a double room. Me and you? Yes, let's have a good talk, just the 2 of us women. But if that's fine with Dad and Dan too. At my mother-in-law's words, my father-in-law and husband looked a little strange. Then my husband opened his mouth in concern. I don't mind that, but are you okay with that, Ella? What? Aren't you a little nervous about sharing a room with Mother? Well, Of course it would be awkward, and I would prefer to be in a different room if at all possible. But under the circumstances, I couldn't say that clearly. Instead of my shuddering, my mother-in-law spoke to my husband. What are you talking about, Dan? What do I always say? I go to your house to get to know Ella. Oh yes, of course. But it's a trip, and Ella should be able to enjoy it without any worries. Don't worry. There are some things you don't have to worry about when you're with your fellow women. Is that how it is? Well, if you insist, I don't mind. Mom, don't pester Ella too much, okay? I know. We'll get along fine, don't worry. Thus, without being able to express my opinion or anything else, the decision was made to share a room with my mother-in-law. My husband repeatedly asked me, Are you sure you want to do this? But I couldn't say no to him. On the day of the trip, I got into the car with a depressed feeling, and after driving for about 2 hours, we arrived at the hotel. After 2 hours of driving, we arrived at the hotel and headed for the spa. I didn't want to go in with my mother-in-law, so I lied and said I had a stomach ache and shifted the timing of my entry. Afterwards, the 4 of us had dinner at a small restaurant inside the hotel. The hotel has a good reputation, so all the food was really good. The only problem was that I'd be in the same room with my mother-in-law. The spa was really nice, and the food was very good. Now all I have to do is sleep with my mother-in-law in the same room for the night. After dinner, I spent some more time in the spa. When I returned to my room, I decided to quickly go to bed, not to engage in conversation with my mother-in-law. Unfortunately, my mother-in-law was still awake. As I was getting ready to go to bed, I heard a voice behind me saying, Excuse me. I fearfully turned around and saw my mother-in-law smiling wryly at me. Mother, is there something wrong? What are you doing getting ready for bed? You sleep outside, don't you? What? What came out from my mother-in-law's mouth was something I had never imagined. I managed to squeeze out a few words as she smiled triumphantly at me. Mom, outside? Didn't you hear me? I said sleep outside. Wait a minute. Then why did you say you wanted to sleep in the same room with me? Of course, to get rid of you like this. There's no room for you. You can sleep in the parking lot. Oh no. Why did my mother-in-law offer to share a room with me? Now I finally understood why. I had been looking forward to this family trip for a long time. I thought it would be a good opportunity to get to know my mother-in-law better. That's what I had been thinking. At that moment, the anger I had been trying so hard to suppress overflowed. I couldn't take it anymore. I don't want to be in the same space with this person any longer. I don't care what Dan and my father-in-law think. This situation, I've had enough of it. I left the room with the bare minimum of luggage. Then I went to the car and decided to stay there. Fortunately, I always had the spare key for the car in my bag, so it was no problem. But if I hadn't, I would have had to spend the night freezing outside. I checked my phone and found a message from my mother-in-law. Be back in time for breakfast so they don't find out. I would tell my husband everything after this trip. I made up my mind and went to sleep. The next day,
Ella! Hey, Ella!
I woke up to the sound of my husband's voice and saw him and my father-in-law. It was still dark and the sun was not yet up. Dan, and Dad too. Why are you?
That's my line. Why are you sleeping in the car? Did you and Mom have a fight?
That's because...
I called you to see if you wanted to watch the sunrise, but you didn't respond, so I assumed you were still sleeping. I was about to drive to the spot when I was surprised to see you sleeping in the car.
Oh, that's right. I checked my phone and found multiple incoming calls from my husband. Sorry I couldn't answer. My father-in-law opened his mouth with a stern look on his face when I told him this.
Ella, why were you sleeping in the car?
That's...
I'm sure there is something going on. I want you to tell me everything.
Dad, perhaps my father-in-law was onto something. I showed them the message I had received from my mother-in-law last night and told them the whole story of how my mother-in-law had been bullying me. When I finished, my husband and father-in-law's faces turned red. I could tell they were quite angry. Eventually, they began to discuss the matter. After a few minutes, my husband and father-in-law returned to the hotel. They had the travel bag in their hands. After loading them into the back of the truck, my husband grabbed the steering wheel. Hey, Dan, where are we going?
Where? We're going home.
Huh? But your mom's not here.
You don't have to call her mom anymore. I don't even think of her as my mother anymore.
Dan. Apparently, my father-in-law and husband believed me. By the time we arrived home, the sun had completely risen, and the weather was pleasant. We bought breakfast at a nearby convenience store, and were eating it at my in-laws' house when I received a call on my phone from my mother-in-law. I looked at my father-in-law and husband, turned on the speakerphone, and pressed the answer button. My mother-in-law shouted, "Hello?" angrily at me as soon as I answered it. Hey, you! Do you know what time it is? Get your ass back in your room! I'm sorry, Mother. I don't think I will be coming back there. What? What are you talking about? If it gets out that you didn't stay in your room, I'm the one who is going to get to be pissed off. Get your ass back here, you stupid wife! At that moment, my father-in-law slammed the desk with a bang and took my phone away from me. Then he shouted angrily into the phone.
That's enough! You've been picking on Ella behind our backs. Didn't you have any shame? You're the one who is an idiot.
What? Wilbur, why are you?
I'm so sick and tired of you. I can't believe you've been pretending to be friendly with Ella and picking on her. I'm divorcing a lousy woman like you. Don't you ever come home again.
Wait a minute. It's a misunderstanding. Ella and I had a fight last night. My husband snatched the phone from my father-in-law, his voice rising.
A fight? Then why was Ella sleeping in the car? You forced her out.
Dan, why even you two?
I'm telling you, we've already gone home. You can pay the hotel bill there too, okay? And Dad says he won't let you in the house anymore, so you will have to go someplace else.
No way! Wait, Dan!
You had it coming. It's your fault for making Ella suffer. I will never think of a woman like you as my mother ever again. I don't want you in our lives ever again.
My husband hung up the phone and blocked my mother-in-law. He then bowed deeply to me.
Ella, I'm sorry I didn't recognize it before. I'm so sorry for all the pain I've caused you.
Yeah, me too. I just couldn't tell you the truth when I thought about how you are your mother's beloved son.
I will protect you from now on. So if you have any problems, you must talk to me right away.
Okay, thank you. After that, my mother-in-law had a rough time. Since she didn't have a credit card, she couldn't pay for the hotel, so she kept calling her husband's phone. But he didn't respond and completely ignored her. My mother-in-law had no choice but to contact her own brother and asked him to replace the money. When he heard about all this from my father-in-law, he was so furious that he forced her to sign the divorce papers that my father-in-law had prepared and took her in. She now lives in her brother and sister-in-law's house and works part-time to make ends meet, and is apparently being treated like a slave. Her brother and sister-in-law also bully her, and her life seems to be really hard. However, she has nowhere else to go. She will probably have to spend the rest of her life as a housekeeper at her brother and sister-in-law's house. I, on the other hand, took this opportunity to move in with my husband to my father-in-law's house. We have decided to remodel my parents-in-law's house. All the expenses are my father-in-law's, and they are even going to add a room for our future child. I can't thank my father-in-law and husband enough for believing my story and going to such great lengths. I want to contribute as much as I can as a daughter-in-law for them who saved me.